Gary here from RC Street Wars and GK Systems Engineering, and today's the day. What will win in a head-to-head shootout, SMC or Zee's? 5,200 milliamp battery 100C versus 5,000 milliamp battery 100C. Let's go. Okay, so before we begin, I'm going to take a minute and go over everything that we're doing and how we did it and why we did it. So the very first thing we're going to do is do an internal resistance test. Now, each battery has been sitting for 24 hours at 75 degrees Fahrenheit at storage charge. Okay, so exactly the way I got it out of the pack is how they've been sitting, 75 degrees, 24 hours. We're going to do an internal resistance test. This is going to give us a good indication of the performance potential of the battery, because the lower the internal resistance, we know that the battery generally has the capability to put out more ultimate power. All right, so let's see if that holds true. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to weigh the batteries to see if there's a big difference between the weight. They're both 5,200 milliamp batteries. They're both 100C. I'm expecting them to weigh pretty close. So after that, we're going to charge them. Now we're charging both batteries at the exact same time on the exact same charger, even with the exact same charge leads. We're going to charge at a 1C charge rate, which is going to be 5.2 amps, and we're going to charge to 4.20 N voltage. As soon as they're done, we're going to bring it over here, and we're going to do a max load test on each battery, and we're going to go into the results and see how they differ from each other. In addition to that, we've already done this, but we run some lighter load tests. I think you're going to be really surprised to see how the lighter load tests shake out and at what point do we start to see a difference in the batteries. I really think you're going to find that interesting. With that being said, let's get into it. Let's head over to the resistance machine and measure the internal resistance of the batteries. Okay, well, here we are, and we're going to start with the resistance test. So for this test, both batteries have been sitting at storage charge for 24 hours in the same place at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason we do this is to ensure that the test is conducted fairly, because small differences in temperature will have an effect on the battery's internal resistance. But because we leave both batteries at storage charge in the same place at 75 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours, we can ensure that the test conditions are the same for each battery. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the Zee's battery, and we're going to plug it in to the meter. Now we plug the main power source in first, and then we plug in the balance port. Now this is a very accurate meter, and we push this button here to get a resistance value, and you see that we have a resistance on cell number 1 of 4.10 milliohms and 4.35 milliohms. Okay, we're going to just refresh that, and we see it really hasn't changed, 4.16 and 4.31. So for the Zee's battery, 24 hours at 75 degrees Fahrenheit at storage charge of 3.85 volts per cell, we have 4 milliohms approximately for each cell. Now let's move on to the SMC battery. So same thing, we're going to plug the main power in first, as it says on the meter, and then we're going to plug in the resistance port, the balance port, and you see here a significant difference in resistance. This is more than half of the resistance of the other one. We got a 1.92 and a 1.86, where this battery here was coming in at a little over 4 and a little bit over 4. So here we have slightly under 2 and slightly under 2. I can tell you, just based off the milliamp hour, I am expecting that at the maximum load, we possibly will see close to double the horsepower out of this one. This is pretty much what the resistance test tells us, but let's see if it works out that way on the dynamometer. So right now, based on what I'm looking at, I'm expecting to see at least double the horsepower, or close to double the horsepower out of this one and this one, but let's see if it holds true. Okay, so before we move on to the dynamometer, we've already taken the internal resistance. Let's take a pack measurement and see what it weighs. So here on this Zee's 100C, we have a battery capacity of 5,200 milliamp hours, and it's coming in at a weight of 263.7 grams with this connector on it. And here we have the SMC 5,200 milliamp hour, also 100C with exact same connector, and this is coming in at 286 grams, so about 20 grams heavier for the SMC. Maybe this has got something to do with the chemical composition, the metals that are in each one, but both packs dimensionally are the same. They're both rated at 5,200 milliamp hours, both at 100C, 20 grams heavier for the SMC. So let's see what that means when we go to the dyno. Okay, we're back. So from here, we've done the internal resistance test. We've weighed the batteries. Now we're going to charge both batteries on identical battery chargers. In this case, I'm using my ISDT Q8 Max smart charger. We're using the exact same charging cable and even the exact same balance lead extension, and we're going to charge both batteries at 1C. It's going to be 5.2 amps, and then as soon as they're done being charged, they're going to go directly on the dyno, and we're going to see what the dyno numbers are. So let's start with the first one, and we're going to charge it at charge LiPo 4.20 2S 5.2 amps, and we're going to start. And the next one is we are going charge LiPo 4.2 volts per cell and 5.2 amps. Okay, let's let these charge, and we'll come back when they're fully charged and go on the dynamometer. Okay, we're back, and the batteries just got done charging, so both batteries are reading 4.20, 4.20, 4.20, 4.20. Let's take these off and go to the dynamometer, and let's see how they do. Okay, and here we are with the Zee's 5,200 milliamp battery, 100C. Remember, this is a $18.45 battery that I paid for it, $18.45. Let's do a max test and see how she does. All right, and the results are as follows. 26.73 miles per hour, 0.66 horsepower, 9.14 inch-pounds of torque, 1,539 watts with a peak amps of 238. Let's look at our power factor here. Basically, what this says here is how quick it got to peak amps. It got to peak amps in 0.313 seconds, 239 amps. And it was holding 3.1 volts. Then 235 amps, 3.17, 226 amps in 1 second, 3.146, 225 amps in 2 seconds, 3.048, finally dipping down to 211 amps at 2.981 volts across the run. And we see here, so just so everyone understands, we have set this at a fixed FDR. This is just mathematical calculation. A FDR of 2-to-1. So any car that had a 2-to-1 FDR and a 100mm wheel, this car would have seen 26.73 miles per hour. So this is for the Zee's 2S 5200 100C. This was a max load test, and I think it did okay. Let's see how the SMC does. Okay, we're back with the SMC 5200 milliamp 100C HCl-EC. That's Edward Charlie battery. And this battery I paid $19.95. So right about $1 more than the Zee's. Is its performance exceeding $1? We're going to find out. So I'm going to set up the exact same test for this SMC EC battery. We're going to do a max load test, and I am going to start it right now. Okay, well, I can tell you already some pretty impressive numbers. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. 53 miles per hour. 53 miles an hour. So if this was in a car with an FDR of 2-to-1 with a 100mm wheel, this would have seen 53 miles an hour, where the last battery was like 26 miles an hour. So almost double speed. Torque, 10 inch-pounds. Horsepower, 1.45 horsepower. I think that's a little bit more than double the horsepower of the Zee's batteries. Watts, 1,851 watts. A peak amp of 285 amps. Now let's look at our power factor numbers. We got to our peak 285 in 0.469 seconds. 3.17 volts, 280, again holding 285 into a half a second in the run. 3.2, 278 1 second, 3.159, 262 amps, 3.173, and then you can see here we got a big jump in volts, still holding good amperage, 197 amps, 3.324 volts at the end of the run. Clearly this is the winner. You can look at this graph and it is quite impressive. So I'm going to get into a few other things that we did to show people some of the differences, but I didn't want to focus on it. But those were the lower load test, the 50 amp and 100 amp test, and we're going to talk about those right now. Okay, well, that was pretty exciting. I think it's pretty clear that the SMC battery just blew away the Zee's battery when we were max loaded. But I want to take a minute and make sure everyone really understands what's happening here. So in this scenario, this is what would the battery produce if we asked all of it. This is if we gear up, we put bigger tires, we go off-road, put bigger motor, we're increasing the load, right? And this is where we saw the greatest difference between the two batteries. When the load was at maximum, the performance of one battery was here and the other one was here. But when we went to lighter load tests, which I'm going to get into now, we saw that the performance was not as significant. I want to explain why that is and why this is important, because when people are evaluating their batteries, we need to be thinking about how we're using it. So for instance, if you have a battery in a very typical ready-to-run car that you bought from the hobby store and it's really under-geared or whatever, and you're just driving around very lightly, you're not putting a lot of load on it, you may not see that difference from going from one battery to the next. And the reason is the battery will supply what is asked of it. So when we ask for more, the higher performance batteries have that ability to supply more. But when we're not asking for a lot, we notice that pretty much anything should be able to meet it. But what was pretty interesting is in every instance of low load testing, the SMC actually beat out the Zees. And it's no wonder when we did the resistance test, it was obvious, it was half the resistance. It was pretty clear to me from doing this for a long time, half the resistance meant that it was going to put out twice the power when pushed. But let me just show you some examples. So if I was to pull up a 50 amp load test, okay, and let me bring up the Zee's batteries first. So this is a 50 amp test. And we see here, the Zee's batteries had no problem at all doing 50 amps, none at all. It put out 0.3 horsepower and the car did 18 miles an hour. Really almost no struggle on the battery at all, 3.7 volts across the board, all right? So again, what is the key numbers here was 3 horsepower, 18 miles per hour. Now let me load up the 50 amp SMC battery. We see here at 50 amps, it was 0.32 horsepower, so a little bit more horsepower, but also 18 miles an hour. Slightly better voltage across the board, 3.8 volts, 3.9 volts across the board. So slightly better, but we can see the graphs look the same because we're only putting a very light load on the battery. We're not asking a lot from it. So when we're not asking a lot from it, the two batteries that we ran, right, even though this one in a max performance scenario just destroyed this one, right? If you're just running it light like this, you're not really going to see the difference, all right? Now let's go up in load. Let's go to 100 amp load, okay? And we're going to see pretty much the same pattern. At 100 amp load, the Zees put out a half a horsepower, 24 miles an hour, all right? Same thing, 3.4 volts pretty much across the board, but there's half a horsepower, 3.4 volts, 24 miles an hour. Now, if I was to show you the SMC, you're going to see the curve looks the same. If you notice the screen, it did jump. Everything is slightly higher. But here we're 0.62 horsepower, 29.35 miles an hour. So more mile an hour, more horsepower, and now we're 3.7 volts across the board. So as we went up in load, right, now we're really starting to see where this battery is just eclipsing this one by a lot. And you have to understand 100 amps is probably what your typical out-of-the-box RTR is going to see when you're punching it. So for sure, when you're punching it, okay, this battery is going to be faster. It's going to make more power, all right? Where we really see the difference is when we gear up. A lot of people know you gear up or you put bigger tires or you're putting just a bigger load on the car. When we go to just absolute maximum, okay, it's night and day difference. We look at the Zees, 0.66 horsepower. Really, it didn't make any more horsepower, maximum load, than it did at 100 amps, okay? 26 miles an hour, 0.66 horsepower, but look at the SMC. 1.45 horsepower, more than double the horsepower, 53 miles per hour, okay? Then this costs $1 more. So to me, the obvious choice, right? You're spending $1 more, but look at the headroom you have. Look, sure, if you just drove the car lightly and you're just playing, are you going to see a difference in performance? No. But punching the car, putting more load on it, absolutely. So if you ask me value for $1, right, this is a clear winner. It's a clear winner. It only costs $1 more, and it doubled my speed, doubled my horsepower. So this is what I think is really interesting about our findings here, is that we are seeing that there is a difference in batteries. Just because this one says 100C and this one says 100C, all right, I would expect them to perform the same, and they clearly did it. So Is this going to be something that we're going to notice across the board? Or is it just isolated to these two? Well, we're going to find out because we're going to keep moving on this journey. I got so many more batteries that we've tested. We're going to be putting out more videos, and we look forward to sharing the results with you guys. So we really hope that you tune in, subscribe, watch, because it's just going to get better from here. But we're really excited about this, and we're so happy to have you guys in our community and support this community. So that being said, see you on the next one.